Hello, everyone. It's been a while since I've been in a university lecture theatre, so forgive me if I'm slightly nervous about this. My name is Lisa King. I am a fashion and textile designer and an artist. I grew up in Bangkok. My parents were Indonesian and British, and I've lived in London for about 20 years now. For those that know my work will probably know that it's synonymous with flowers and deconstructing them, arranging them into flat arrangements that are then digitally printed onto silk scarves or created for installation. So you're probably wondering what I'm doing here and where my story with batik comes from. Full screen. That is what my work looks like typically, and that's my studio in East London. So my early influence of batik in my life, I should just say that this is very much a personal journey of batik of one person as an artist, and yeah, I hope you enjoy it. So as a child, it appeared in my family photos. This is my great-grandmother in her batik kain, an iron-fisted lady who ran a very strict household. Next to her, my beautiful grandmother, Rose, the envy of all the women in the family, who were much shorter. My mother is the small one in the background. Her nickname was Klein, which means small in Dutch. But what she lacked in height, she very much made up for in character. My mother came from a long line of strong women from Madura in Java, but she spent her formative years in New York City as my grandfather worked for the Foreign Trade Office. She returned to Jakarta age 13, and she relearned her home culture, and she would later become very interested in politics, economics, with a side hustle in textile design. In 1972, she met a young British lawyer in Jakarta one summer, and they ended up moving to Thailand in the early 70s and would build a life there for the next 47 years. That is my father on his wedding day in a rather garish matching gold batik tie and shirt combo. He really embraced his newly adopted culture. At school, my mother would take any excuse to dress me up in a Balinese costume and promptly make me do a legong dance in front of the whole school. These were the other very proudly Indonesian ladies on International Day at school in Bangkok. My mother loved design. She spent several years building her dream Balinese house on a beach in Thailand, an ode to her beloved Bali, filling it with paintings and carvings shipped from Bali one by one, all brought by longtail boat onto Railay Beach in southern Thailand in Krabi. This house would provide me a lot of inspiration in later years. She was a professional buying agent, and she worked with the Thai National Museum, so became an avid collector of textiles, ceramics, rugs, carvings, paintings. No market anywhere in the world was safe if Farida was in town. My mother was a true maximalist. She loved Jim Thompson fabrics mixed with Indonesian carvings. Every space had something in it. Much to my mother's joy, in 2003 I went on to study a bachelor's degree in textiles at Central St. Martin's. I ended up specializing in print design. This was no accident. I was very obsessed with Alexander McQueen, Vivienne Westwood. Batik was far from my mind. I dabbled in it a bit on trips to Indonesia, but I was in no way hooked. And she used to send me tear sheets of designers that would use batik and was like, look, Dries van Noten. So in 2013, after a bit of stint in styling and working for Kylie Minogue, I launched a brand with a digitally printed collection of silk and cashmere scarves. That's Mum wearing one of them. And I was lucky enough to sell them to Fortnum & Mason, Neiman Marcus, Bergdorf Goodman, and other lovely stores around the world. However, in parallel to the birth of my brand, my mother was sadly diagnosed with cancer, and unfortunately, after a long 7-year battle, she passed away in 2017. And like they say, you don't know what you've got until it's gone. So in 2020, I found myself back in my mother's house, pregnant, during COVID in Thailand. The borders closed to tourists and many businesses dormant. And I really wanted to be close to her spirit, so I persuaded my husband that we should take the leap and try and bribe someone at the embassy to let me take him into the country. So on the peninsula, there are two batik studios. One where they taught batik to tourists in that very kind of touristy, bright Phuket-style batik, and the other one that did more batik for the local market was closed for COVID. I asked if I could use their facilities, and even though batik is originally from Indonesia, this method is very much influenced by our Malaysian neighbours, where the wax is drawn onto a stretched canvas and then the dye is painted directly onto the cloth. So that's Dala Batik. So I had to use what I had in front of me. I sketched the shells from my mother's contraband shell collection and then freehand transferred it onto stretched cloth. That's me, very pregnant. So I freehand draw onto the cloth and then we trace it with wax using a chanting. And then the wax creates a barrier to the dyes. And when we paint the dyes on, and once it dries, the cloth is boiled and the wax is removed, leaving the design behind. So I wanted to play with scale. I mean, these colors are very much what the studio had available at the time. But I've always, I think through my training at St. Martin's, been taught to kind of try and flip things and deconstruct them. So I just wanted to go really large. And I wanted to work on the premise that this was one piece of cloth that would be split down the middle for the neck, and you would wear it as a kaftan, basically. So, yeah, in the following months, I sort of developed these designs, armed with my newborn in one hand, and a small team of people, assistants, trying to help me develop a collection that was more commercial and muted in color palette for the resort wear market. These were some of the designs. Yeah, so I started selling those in hotels around the world. Fast forward 7 years, well, not 7 years, 4 years. It had been a continuous sorting of my mother's life and packing up her home in Thailand and, dealing with her ceramics and Japanese kimono collection and Edo period screens and all kinds of things she loved to buy and hide from my father. But in January 2023, thinking I'd got to the end of it, the warehouse that helped us ship a lot of the things to the UK said, "Oh, yes, Madame put something away when she was still alive." And I was like, "Oh, what is it?" So it was a container holding no less than 110 boxes of Southeast Asian textiles. And I was like, "Mum, what have you done?" So typical. So my sisters, of course, by this point were very much over this whole process, and I'm the dedicated textile designer, so they said, "You deal with it." And I was like, "Great." So I said, what do I do? I said, obviously, as a print designer, this is an amazing resource, but A, how do I store it? Where do I store it? Should these things be in a museum? How old are they? How rare are they? Do I create a print and pattern archive? Do I give them to the V&A? Do I give them to the National Museum in Thailand? What do I do? So I basically went on a mission of stalking anyone that would talk to me about textiles and batik. And on my, I'm very persistent when I want something. On my journey, I met the lovely Fiona Curlog, who spoke on Friday, and Leslie Pullen, and this whole network of amazing people who are much more knowledgeable about me, who really helped me answer some of these questions. And what I really realized along the way, because obviously I was sharing a bit of the process through my own audience in fashion, is that a lot of people in contemporary fashion don't understand how batik is made. And it appears, you can buy it on Ulla Johnson dresses or at Next, but for the most part, it's printed versions of the handmade batik. So through starting to share the story, through my fashion community, opportunities began to arise to talk about and create batik. So out of that came a collaboration through one of my husband's clients, a men's tailoring brand called New and Lingwood, 160-year-old brand, Savile Row brand, the original Eton Outfitters, who had this program called Renew, where you could take in your fabrics and they would make a tailored piece for you in their atelier in Jermyn Street. So for London Craft Week this year, we did a collaboration for a 30-piece capsule collection using a section of my mother's archive into one-off pieces, because by that point, Fiona had literally helped me go through every single piece and be like, you can't touch those. You can maybe touch those. Those you should keep for your design archive. And I just thought, you know, what good is it? Although a lot of people in museums told me, I can't do that, that's sacrilegious. I was like, if these sit in a box, they're pretty much going to die. So I thought I wanted people to enjoy these fabrics, to see them, to wear them, to reignite kind of inspiration around them. So this was the store on Chiltern Street. So we're kind of bringing in London's menswear audience into this kind of batik world. We even caught the eye of British Vogue, who I spoke to about, just, you know, sustainability and kind of reworking vintage fabrics and the value in that. And then in parallel to that, you know, it had been a while, I was still selling in resort collections, but I really wanted to connect, now that my son was a bit older, in the ways of making traditional batik. I'm sorry, this is New and Lingwood's made-to-measure service, so you can go and choose a piece from the archive and then get your suit made. And the reason it's got two pieces of cloth, because obviously in British tailoring, the traditions is that we cut from the length of the fabric and we lay the pattern that way, whereas a lot of the fabrics that my mother collected are kain, so they're laid horizontally, so you have to use, for the most part, use two pieces of skirt cloth to make one piece of Western garment, which is an interesting thing in itself. So on Fiona's advice and through much bargaining with my very tired husband, I managed to steal a couple days in Jakarta at the beginning of this year. And I went in search of a lady called Ibu Hani, who has a traditional family-run batik studio called Batik Winata Sastro. I had a few amazing days with her. She followed me around for 3 days, telling me what to do, slapping me on the wrist when I would do things wrong. That's her. And I learnt the stamping, which traditionally is only meant for the men, and women do the hand batik. So basically they have this whole library of the wax stamps, and then you put the stamp in a sort of hot plate of wax, and then you stamp on the fabric. And then I wasn't allowed to get involved with the dyeing myself, but there was a lovely lady who did all the dyeing for me, and this is just to show the difference. So the one on the left is a reactive dye, a chemical dye, and on the right is indigo dyeing. So they do a mixture of both. And that's after the wax, after it's been boiled and the wax has been removed. And then this is hand wax. So you have your chanting, and that goes in a little pot of wax, which is normally a mixture of paraffin and beeswax, and you draw with that. And so, as you can see, this is different to how I was doing it in Thailand, which is on a stretch cloth. This is holding the cloth like that and then drawing like this. So this is the Indonesian way of doing it. So after 3 days, I came away with a sort of very, swatches just from the stamps that they had there. And at the moment I'm developing a kind of collection, creating my own stamps based on, new drawings to be made in this way, and hopefully create a collaboration with this studio. And then to bring you into present day, off the back of the resort wear designs, people started to ask me to create large-scale batik pieces as wall hangings for interior settings and hotels. So I've spent this past summer setting up a batik studio in East London, which has come with its own challenges, mostly the weather. because nothing dries. And what would take me a day to do in Thailand takes about a week in London. So the process of testing fabrics and colors is just very time consuming. Obviously it's hard to hang things outside because you never know when it's going to rain. And then, the implications of having a big boiling vat of water when you have a toddler is also tricky. So I've had to modify my practice. So instead of boiling the cloth, I iron the wax off, and then I have to dry clean it to get the excess wax off. And it's been a process. And I've had a lovely lady called Mary Spiru, who taught at Morley College, has actually been amazing, helping me kind of refine that process. And because of the time-consuming nature of it, I've sort of created a method of drafting the prints using masking fluid and acrylic ink to just sketch them out before I go onto the fabric. So that's what that is on the left. And yeah, so that's me drawing onto the cloth on the right with a washable pen, because then I trace that with the wax, which is on the left. And that's kind of 2 stages of the batik. So I've sort of taken, for this commission that I've been doing this summer, they wanted a kind of denser version of what I was doing before. So we sort of created that, and that is going on a yacht at the end of the year. And yeah, I just wanted to touch on quickly on the topic of sustainability. I'm in no way, it's a funny word, isn't it? At least in fashion it is. So on the left is at Batik Winata Sastra. So they keep all the wax and then they refine it and reuse it. Not all batik studios do this, as I'm told. And I think more needs to be done to make that a more sustainable process. And then on the right are reactive dye swatches. So I'm most comfortable with those because that's what I got taught at uni. But my sort of mission now is to kind of use more natural dyes. And I just wanted to highlight these people. There's some amazing people in London, especially in Walthamstow, doing things with natural dyes. So there's an indigo garden in Walthamstow, in case you didn't know that. And Colour, if you follow Colour of Saying, she did an exhibition during London Design Festival on ethical colour and people who supply it in this country. So that's really interesting. So I just wanted to end by saying I've spoken to textile conservationists, print library dealers, museums, fashion interior designers, and what's evident is that there are so many possibilities with batik as a source of inspiration for design, and everyone I speak to gets quite excited about it. And what I feel is it is more relevant than ever, apart from, to me, on a personal scale, as a tribute to my late mother, but also to the mood of current times, the need to slow fashion down, the need for authenticity, handmade craft, heritage, and also wellness. There's a great therapy in batik, the patience you need to do it because it cannot be rushed. And I hope with my mother's archive and my own practice, I can create a platform where batik creates collaboration, which fuels its preservation and conversations around contemporary design, honouring but pushing traditional techniques in new ways and making steps towards a more sustainable material available to a wider audience. And that's me. Thank you. Thank you. I was going to say I brought some of my mom's fabrics, if anyone wants to have them.
This is going to be very quick. I just kind of wanted to justify why we have batik in the symposium. I was trying to find a connection between like resist dyeing techniques that, aside from the plangi and all the other ones, I wanted to see if there was some type of a connection to batik in Philippine textiles. So I've stalked Lisa on Instagram and asked her to come and give us kind of an overview of her practice and stuff. And then very quickly, just because I was very curious about these, and Sherry mentioned these a while ago, but these are I was very curious about these abaca textiles that are supposedly hand painted. These are from Lake Lanao. So this one is from Vienna, the Weltmuseum in Vienna, and it's kind of very rare. You hardly ever see this type of technique, and it's specific to this place. So with the help of the Weltmuseum did a thorough analysis of this abaca hand painted, they say, but might also be kind of hand printed with a block. They haven't seen traces of wax or resin, but they have traces of starch or rice paste. So I don't really know what the I'm not an expert in this, but I was just very curious how if this technique has some resonance with batik in Indonesia. Aside from, and of course, they also had a very thorough, I can share with you the report that they did on the dyes and the different types of, they didn't mention a mordant. They said that they needed a different type of test for that. These are just the types of dyes that they used. So aside from the one in Vienna, you also, as Cherry mentioned, there's a few other of these types at the Field Museum. There are two of these in the Field Museum. And it's very interesting, again, the provenance is very specific to Lake Lanao. And it says that it is, this was brought to the St. Louis Exposition in 1904. And there are two of them. And they trace it to an island in, a place in Lake Lanao called Boa di Poso. I'm not sure. Maybe Marianne has been to that place, but you could go. I ask around a lot of friends to see, are they still doing it? They do say there is abaca, that they still do abaca there, but this type of painting is long gone. Nobody can remember making it. And I'm sure the batik experts might be able to kind of maybe analyze it better and see if this, in fact, is just hand painted or is it block printed? The other exemplar for it is in the American Museum of Natural History. This is the third one that I've seen. This is all for the mapping project, by the way. So I'm always going around looking for unusual things. So this is the third one. And again, you'll see similarities. It's again an abaca, the motifs and everything else. There is no chemical analysis for this one, so I'm not sure. I think it's just a very interesting. And the last one that I've found around is the one that Cherry mentioned in Boston, the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. And this one is very red, and I feel like it seems like this is a bit more possible that it's block printed or hand print. And I just wanted to point out from the archives that this is from the Field Museum, and they do talk about the native coloring material, etc. It's for me very interesting that it's on abaca. So anyway, that is where supposedly Ru Alonto is saying that it might be in Lake Lanao. So it would be great if we could go there and find if this is still there. I just wanted to mention Fiona's, but I was just kind of looking around for all sorts of connections with batik, and there is some techniques, and I was very curious with Lisa's mention of the Malaysian technique where you lay it down, and then so maybe we can talk about that a bit. But so this one does use rice paste. This technique that Fiona mentioned. I'm sure she can tell us more about it. And then see maybe, but you can see kind of the resonance, I think, of. And just to end it, this curiosity further led me to a really interesting, again, looking for this resist dyeing and technique. And this one is on bamboo. And this, they use rice paste and paper. And this is from the, and this is called the lakub. No, so it's on bamboo, but it still uses resist dyeing using paper stencils and then dipping it in a vat. But what's really cool, and I end with this, this is the technique. So the women, and this was just recently sort of revived, you might say, in the 1970s. I've asked the National Museum, what is your oldest dated lakub? And they say it's all from the 1970s. And so, but they know that it's sort of, again, a kind of extinct practice until the 1970s when the NCCA started like reviving this thing. But what was very, very cool was that through the mapping site, this gentleman, his name is, I can't remember his name now, but his uncle said that he has kept this lakub too from 18. Well, his great uncle, he collected it in when he was during the Philippine-American War, and he was a soldier. And he said that he had taken this from Lake Lanao and brought it with him, and it's been with him since the 1960s, given to him in the 1960s. And so he wanted to give it back to the Philippines. Well, first he wanted to give it to the Field Museum in Chicago. And I said, like, okay, why? Can't you just give it back to somewhere, a source culture? Because, you know, this might be the earliest dated lakub that's available. So through a bit of negotiation, and then I spoke with Jeremy Barnes at the National Museum, and well, they can't really do anything about it. So now he is donating these, and it's on its way now to me in a box, and I will bring it with Marian to which I end with two places. The Marawi Information Center, that Marian is building with the provincial government of Lanao del Sur, and she says this will be a very precious thing after all the devastation. And then the second one would go to the Bangsang Moro Museum. So I just end there, and let's open the panel for questions. Yes. Whoops.